most of the anti-Semitic acts perpetrated in this country are perpetrated by white Germans, by the far right.
Today's guest in our episode is Lucas Febraro, Director of Communications at DiEM25, a political movement that has the aim to democratize the EU before it dissolves.
We saw Jewish people stand together with Arabs, with Muslims, with Palestinians, talking about peace with justice. In other words, it was exactly the sort of thing that we need so sorely in moments like these. And the Berlin Senate cut the funding of Oyun on the charges of hidden anti-Semitism.
We discuss a lot of the current things that are happening in Germany, such as the rise of the far right, demonstrations against the party AfD.
As a response to a plan by the far right to mass deport Arabs and Muslims. Here comes this group of Arabs and Muslims to try to join the demonstration against the mass deportation of Arab and Muslims. Mm-hmm. What happens to them? They're insulted, they're called terrorists, they're spat at by white Germans. So you ever asked yourself, what is it that you would be doing during the Nazi period if you were living in Germany? What you're doing right now is exactly what you would have been doing then.
This is our first episode that we're doing in English. Normally we're doing this podcast in Spanish, but we have tried this time to expand to a new audience, to talk different topics and to try to reach to different people living in Berlin and in Germany. So if you're living in Germany or Berlin, don't forget to subscribe. This podcast is going to become very interesting, so you don't want to miss any episode. So if you haven't done it yet, please click that button, subscribe. And now let's start with the podcast. And welcome everyone to the Guten Tag podcast. This is the first podcast that we're doing in English. My name is Luardo. I'm a Mexican living in Berlin like for 10 years. And with me is, as in all the Spanish episodes, Benji.
Hi, I'm another Mexican that is living here for 8 years already. So
this is a podcast where we will try to make you feel more like in Germany, make you feel more comfortable with the stuff that are going on in the city. And also we want to have conversations with people that are inspiring or that have interesting points of view of what's going on. Today we have our first guest is Lucas Febraro. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Huge responsibility.
Yeah.
We can rise to the occasion.
Yeah, well, thank you for accepting the invitation. I think that we have a lot of interesting topics that we can talk about today. But first, I would like you to describe yourself in one sentence. What do you do and what's your mission?
Well, I am Communications Director at DiEM25, a pan-European political movement. And DiEM's mission, and I guess by extension, my mission as well, is to advance radically progressive politics. Mm-hmm. In the case of DiEM, particularly in Europe, it's called the Democracy in Europe movement. That's the acronym DiEM stands for.
When did you start to work there, and what was your motivation to join this movement?
I joined DiEM in January 2021 as a member and a volunteer. I was working in communications at an agency here in Berlin at the time. And I've always been very interested in politics my entire life, basically, and left-wing politics in particular. I followed the debt crisis in Greece very closely, especially in 2015, after Syriza came to power. Like many on the left in Europe and around the world, I was hugely disappointed at how the governments turn out eventually. I admired Yanis's role in trying to prevent what eventually did happen from happening. And so as a result, I was aware of DiEM25 since its founding, basically. But for whatever reason, I only joined officially in 2021, and I've been working with the movement on a full-time basis since November of that same year.
How long have you been here in Germany?
It's going to be 10 years in a few days.
Oh, really?
Early February.
Quite a while. What brought you to this city?
I was making music at the time.
Okay.
So the old cliche, really. Just an electronic music producer.
Okay.
Moves to Berlin.
I want to be a DJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did it happen?
No, I didn't. I wouldn't be here if it hadn't.
Well, maybe you had good the first 3 years and then you decided to do something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's very kind of you, but no, it didn't. No, it did not. It did not go particularly well. Particularly in the financial sense, obviously, everyone knows it's very hard to be an artist full time. But still, I was active in the sense that I was making music, but slowly I kind of like just dropped altogether. I did some odd jobs. I worked 2.5 years with Foodora. I don't know if you remember them.
Yeah.
Just, delivering food on my bike.
Okay.
And then just ended up working in communications just through luck, and someone knew someone who knew someone.
Okay, but that's a great outcome. So you had the expectation to become a DJ, and then you decided more to join more like a course about with political impact at the end. Then,
yeah, I mean there was a lot that happened in between those two things.
Yeah,
but that's mostly the starts and where we're at, I guess, and where I ended up.
We're gonna be because you mentioned that you're very left-wing oriented. We get a lot of hate because they say that we are very lefty. They call us zurdo. I don't know if that word is zurdo. How the ones who write with a left. Yeah. And we don't even talk about topics that are like extremely progressive or very left-wing. I think sometimes we just talk things that I feel that are common sense, like, okay, some welfare, I think it's fine. Some rights for some minorities are a good thing, but just for expressing sometimes those stuff, or like why the rich are accumulating so much, and just by questioning those stuff, we get a lot of hate of
like this
haters.
thing with the apartment situation that companies are buying a lot of complexes. So they question, like, why do you think like that? Like,
so what should they do? Just give it away to everyone? You communist? And like, oh, come on.
You're about to get a lot of new haters.
From
beyond the Spanish-speaking
but it's fine because we have now like some sort of like how's it called? Protection against
experience.
We're experienced about it just it's lies. We don't take it so serious anymore. Then you decided to start doing content on TikTok and Instagram to spread out a lot of the message, I think, and the mission from DiEM25. Or you did that more like as your own conviction?
Both. There's a lot of overlap, I guess. I also, because of my role at DiEM25, I'm involved in DiEM25's social media presence, social media management. So if you go to DiEM25 social media accounts, you see my face there as well. Just like appearing on videos, talking about DiEM, talking about just things that are happening in the world from the point of view of what the movement has to say on them, or have to offer on them. That was really my first experience in, I guess, making content more on this sort of like with this personal involvement. And especially after October 7th, due to DiEM's position on this topic, which is a rare position to see, unfortunately, these days in European political organizations, especially in places like Germany. That ended up connecting with a lot of people. And because I saw that happening as well, and then I saw that, the positive messages that we're getting from people, which again, sort of made us feel that we were having an important impact at an important moment. I also, on a personal level, got more and more involved in this, and with DiEM25, of course, like I am not DiEM25. My duty is to speak on behalf of the movement when I serve essentially as a spokesperson on our social media, on the M25 social media account.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go beyond that because I just had too much to say, I guess.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have also the freedom to just speak for myself through my own channels. And so I started getting active in making content on my own personal social media accounts on Instagram and on TikTok. And once again, it ended up connecting with a lot of people, which I was really happy to see, and it didn't really expect at all. And yeah, that continues to be the case. And that's what I've been doing this past few months.
I think it's very interesting when you do that you, at least you know that you're not alone, that you're not the only one having those thoughts. Yeah, you were saying, because of the current panorama currently in Europe, there's a lot of xenophobic agendas, everything going a bit more into the fascism, what we are seeing in some countries like Italy, like in France with Le Pen, in the Netherlands as well, and in Germany. Why do you think this is happening?
Well, I think this the political situation in Europe, and particularly in places like Germany since October, it's been the perfect storm for the expression of the sort of latent racist sentiment that has always really been there beneath the surface. It didn't just appear out of nowhere. The far right is always happy to express it very freely.
Yeah.
So that's never been an issue for them.
Yeah.
What has changed though is that the liberal sort of mainstream now feels very comfortable expressing these views, which are in a lot of cases very difficult to differentiate from the views that the far right might have.
Yeah, it's like when we see that Germany is concerned about anti-Semitism, it seems that they tend to tolerate it a bit more when it comes from movements from the far right. That when it becomes from people that are identifying with the people from Palestine, then they tend to oppress more those than the ones from the far right. They even have their right to go on the streets every Monday with their Pegida movement. They have the police around them, but they are not getting a ban on their on the demonstrations sometimes. And that like exposes a little bit of hypocrisy, right?
But that is assuming that all of these accusations of anti-Semitism are true to begin with.
Okay.
They are not. A lot of it is just an excuse to express Islamophobia and racism against Arabs and Muslims. I'm not saying that anti-Semitism doesn't exist. Of course, it does exist, and it's a very real and serious problem, especially in places like Germany. But like you said, if you look at the statistics, most of the anti-Semitic acts perpetrated in this country are perpetrated by white Germans, by the far right. And so it's a sad irony because, for instance, Germany has this huge bureaucracy to fight anti-Semitism, right? Most of it is run by white Germans. And the people who are targeted by this bureaucracy as anti-Semites are disproportionately Jewish people. So we have this perversion in Germany in which we have white Germans lecturing Jewish people on what's anti-Semitic and what isn't. Also, when you get into things like the definition of anti-Semitism by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, this very controversial definition of anti-Semitism, which has been embraced by governments, including the German government. As a matter of fact, the Senate here in Berlin wanted to make adherence to this definition a condition to get public funding for the arts. If you're an artist, if you're a venue, it's a very perverse definition that is has been criticized by academics the world over. To boil it down to the essence of it, it basically equates criticism of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism. Also, by the way, earlier in the text, they say that it is anti-Semitic to equate the Jewish people with the state and the government and the actions of the state of Israel, which is absolutely right.
What does that mean?
It means that if the Israeli government commits a crime, it doesn't mean that all Jews are responsible for it, which is absolutely true. And to say that that's not the case, to go against that, it is anti-Semitic. Should be pretty uncontroversial.
Yeah.
However, in the same definition, in another bullet point or whatever they're called, they say that criticizing the state of Israel and antagonizing it, I don't know exactly what words are used, but basically to be against the state of Israel is an anti-Semitism, which is something that this other bullet point that we were talking about calls anti-Semitic. So the bottom line is, according to their own definition, their definition is anti-Semitic. So it's a mindfuck. Excuse the term.
It's like when you say I'm against American imperialism is not the same that I hate Americans, like the individual.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. It's you just put it very, very beautifully, just how simple it should be.
Yeah.
But in the case of Israel, it isn't, because the state of Israel itself thrives on this notion that they speak for the Jewish people as a whole, and to attack them is to be anti-Semitic. So they do their utmost to perpetrate this notion, and it's something that the bankrollers of Israel, the people, the governments who keep supporting Israel and arming it and enabling it to commit the crimes that it commits, also embrace these same fictions.
Okay.
Essentially. So that's what we're seeing in Germany. We're seeing charges of anti-Semitism being weaponized to silence criticism of the state of Israel. And we're seeing especially Arab people, Muslims, and Jews being victims of this silencing.
There was this was an art collective that was very pro LGBTQ that stopped receiving funding after they organized a event against hate, and then because there was, they call it hidden anti-Semitism, right?
That's OUM, a cultural center here in Berlin in Icon. Yes, OUN is a very interesting story that serves as a perfect example of the climate that we're living through in Germany. Yes, you're right. Basically the heart of the issue was this event that OUN hosted in November 4th, if I'm not mistaken, which was the anniversary of Jewish Voice for a Just Peace in the Middle East, which is a left-wing, anti-Zionist, progressive Jewish organization. The Senate tried to pressure OUN into canceling this event because they said it was too politically charged or whatever. OUN refused, very bravely, I might add, refused to do that. The event went ahead. I was there. What happened at these events? This controversial, scandalous event. We saw Jewish people stand together with Arabs, with Muslims, with Palestinians, talking about understanding, talking about peace with justice. We saw artistic performances. We saw political discussions about what does it mean for Palestine to truly be free, for Jews and for Palestinians, for Christians, for everyone. In other words, it was exactly the sort of thing that we need so sorely in moments like these. And for their troubles, the Berlin Senate cut the funding of OUN, like you said, under the pretext that under charges of hidden anti-Semitism, which is ludicrous because
if it's hidden, means that you cannot see it, and if you cannot see it, how do you know that it's there? It's like I don't know.
How can you defend yourself from a charge of hidden anti-Semitism? You know?
Yeah. How do you prove that you are not?
It's hidden. You cannot see it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The OUN, which is a huge space, is a beautiful space for people who don't live in Berlin and had never been to OUN. Again, had this funding cut. Over 30 people, most of them migrants or people with marginalized people, lost their jobs as a result. And a lot of them also had their residence permits being jeopardized because they lost their source of income. So, just the other day, I think yesterday, as of this recording, actually, the Berlin Senate had this discussion in which the motion in which they wanted that was presented to make this definition of anti-Semitism that I just mentioned, the IHRA definition, to make it a condition to get public funding for the arts, that motion was withdrawn, which was a very important and these days rare small victory for the pro-Palestine movement, the movement for peace and freedom in the Middle East here in Germany. However, that's not enough because the funding for OUN has to come back, and that's what we were chanting right in front of the Berlin Senate. Which was a beautiful thing to see. Everyone, shouted and screamed and hugged each other when it was announced that the motion had been withdrawn. But in a matter of just seconds later, everyone was chanting, "What about OUN?" And that's a question that we need to ask now. What about OUN?
Okay, I would like to jump a little bit on what happened a couple days ago in this big demonstration against AfD or against hatred. And there was the demonstration, as far as I understand, was organized by Fridays for Future, or they're involved?
The one here in Berlin, it was called for by Fridays for Future, yes.
And there was the issue that people that were there with Palestinian flags were asked to leave, or they didn't allow them to participate in this demonstration. Was that?
Yeah. So first of all, full disclosure, I wasn't there, but I saw a lot of reports by people who were there at the Palestinian bloc that, as you mentioned, tried to join the demonstration. And what they said, and again, you can see a ton of first-hand reports on social media, people like Salah Said, who were there and talked about their experience. Essentially, they arrived and, Palestinian flags with keffiyehs. They were immediately surrounded by police and prevented from joining the demonstration. Not only that, they were also attacked by the other participants in the demonstration. They were insulted. They were called terrorists. They were spat at. And then eventually they tried to talk to the police and to the organizers, I believe, but eventually they had to. By the way, people there also reported that Israeli flags were visible in the demonstration. No one prevented, because that was that's the excuse, right? That this is about something else. You can't come here with flags of the country, I suppose they would say. So no, you can't join. But again, Israeli flags, no problem, apparently. Also, I would like to add that the reports seem to vary widely depending on the city in which these protests took place in Germany, because it wasn't only in Berlin. There were protests all over the country. So I'm just talking about Berlin now. I want to make that clear. Although there were very concerning and very similar things happening in other places like Munich as well, but it wasn't necessarily everywhere. Anyway, they were escorted by police to the entrance of the U-Bahn, and they had to leave. Again, this was a protest called. Why did this happen for people who are not aware? So it was revealed, weeks ago, that the German far right, including members of the far right AfD party, had a secret meeting in November in which a so-called master plan for quote-unquote remigration, which is the euphemistic term for mass deportations, was discussed. That involves the mass deportation of migrants, which you would expect, unfortunately, to hear from the far right. But not only that, also the stripping of German citizenship of people who are not ethnically German, essentially, and who have other passports, so that they can also be deported. Even people who are, who grew up in Germany, who were even born in Germany.
Which is an irony because they just passed the law to have the double nationality.
But they were fighting a lot against that, I think, right?
Well, here's the thing. According to the reports that came out of this meeting, there was a member of parliament, a member of the Bundestag from the AfD present at this meeting. And according to the report, she said that part of the reason for which the AfD had dropped their opposition to this law was so that it would make it easier to strip people of German citizenship. Because if you have a second passport, that means that your German passport can be taken away because you have another one.
Smart.
Exactly. But if you only have a German passport, and you're someone they don't like, a brown person, an Arab, a Muslim, then they can't do it because it's unconstitutional, because you can't leave someone stateless.
True, yeah. What do you do with them? Yeah.
Exactly. So
it would be like in The Terminal, like the movie from Tom Hanks. He will just move around the airport or what.
So that's why those demonstrations were called, were as a response to the this story that broke and on the news. Let's go back to what happened to the Palestinian bloc in a demonstration here in Berlin. They tried to join a demonstration that was called for as a response to a plan by the far right to mass deport Arabs and Muslims. Here comes this group of Arabs and Muslims to try to join the demonstration against the mass deportation of Arab and Muslims. What happens to them? They're insulted, they're called terrorists, they're spat at by white Germans.
Yeah, at the end, it was a demonstration maybe from white people to white people at the end. Because who will understand more what is to be an oppressed minority rather than the oppressed minority? Even though they say, we support you and we stand by you, because might be a lot of people who actually understand their position, but they cannot know exactly how it is. So excluding the people who are actually the oppressed minority in this kind of things seems like very, I don't know, stupid or or a hypocrite.
Absolutely right. You have to also remember that these are really huge demonstrations, right? In Berlin, we're talking like 350,000 people, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And the mainstream parties supported and in some cases even joined and were part of the alliances that call for those demonstrations, including the parties in power. What are the parties in power doing here in Germany? The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was on the cover of Der Spiegel saying that we have to deport we have to start deporting in large scale again. Just a month ago, the Vice Chancellor of the Green Party, Robert Habeck, was basically gave this this speech. I think it was I don't know if it was televised, but it was out on social media. This 7 or 9 minute long speech in which he called on Arab and Muslims in Germany to distance themselves from anti-Semitism and from Hamas, or their presence in Germany might not be tolerated for much longer. Just pure racism, basically the assumption being that these people are anti-Semites until it's proven that they're not. The German president did a very similar thing. Now, these people are joining these demonstrations against due to the revelation that the far right it basically wants to do something very similar to what they're already stating that they want to do: mass deportations. So
So you mean like, what's the scandal if the government already in power in the coalition is already in favor of that? So this other meeting,
they're giving a preview of what you can expect from the AfD. Especially that's without even getting into the specifics of the repression that we've been seeing from during protests for Palestine, the fact that they were banned to begin with in places like Berlin for almost the entire month of October. The fact that you can't, in some instances, you're told that you can't chant "Stop the Genocide." We had there was a case in Frankfurt. You guys are Mexicans, so you're gonna like this one. There was a case in Frankfurt at a protest late last year, where a person holding up a sign saying "This Mexican stands with Palestine" or something very similar to that, was detained by police and booked. If memory doesn't fail me, the reason. In the sign, there was a little raised fist that he drew, and the police deemed that to be offensive.
It feels like they're comparing everything that is, say, in pro-Palestine, like if you were showing the swastika or doing the Hitler salute. It feels like almost that point.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say that, because that's exactly what Bavaria, for example, the prosecutor in Bavaria wants to do. They want to make the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" punishable on the same level as displaying a swastika in Germany.
Yeah. I see that the Arab world, they're having their issues with the Jewish, maybe of territorial, of the what some countries are calling to be colonialism, or religious differences that they have. But the movement of anti-Semitism, of displacing Jewish people from each country or from every settlement where they were living, came from Europe. So Europe was moving, expelling the Jews from the areas, from Ukraine, from Russia, from Germany, from Czech Republic, Italy, Spain, everywhere. So it feels for me that it's more like a European stuff of sending Jewish away, rather than for example, South American person, if they say, "I support Palestine," why should that be anti-Semitic, where your ancestors didn't have anything to do with anti-Semitism?
If you have a negative perception of the Jewish people as a group of people,
or if there's conspiracy that they control the world, for example.
Exactly. Also, for example. And unfortunately, anti-Semitism has a very long and rich history in the worst possible sense of the word. So these conspiracies abound. If you espouse any of them, I think you can, no matter your ancestry, you can very rightly be called an anti-Semite. What we have to draw the line, though, is that what even causes, for the most part, these discussions. Why even have this discussion right now, right? It's because there's a state that calls itself the Jewish state, that again claims to speak and act for the Jewish people as a people, systematically occupy, ethnically cleanse, and right now massacre another population, another marginalized population, which is a terrible irony that this state and this ideology, Zionism, has turned Jewish people into the perpetrators of these acts that have so scarred and hurt and even threatened the very existence of the Jewish people, due to acts that were committed in Europe, of course, due to the Holocaust, due to Nazism, due to fascism. But also, long history of persecution of the Jewish people from before that as well. So to me, that's the important distinction that we need to make. Obviously, Europeans in particular should be very attuned to their history of persecuting minorities in general, the Jewish people being the most infamous case. But let's also remember that they systematically murdered Roma and Sinti people during the Holocaust. It's to me, the question is, what was the lesson that was learned in places like Germany, right?
Yeah.
To me, the lesson is very obvious, is never again let fascism and murderous ethno-nationalism rise in our countries, and never again let us support it anywhere else. To me, that should have been the lesson, and they're failing miserably at learning this lesson.
Do you think that they're just maybe blind and they cannot see it, or they just have a very strong feeling of guilt that even though they acknowledge that what is going on, they cannot just accept it because of this sense of historic guilt, or they are just being Germans and following the rules?
Well, it's it's a complex thing, but I think that there is an element of that, what you just mentioned. But then again, like, they're very right to feel guilty. They should, right? It's a horrible legacy, and it wasn't even that long ago. So it's something that you must reckon with, and you should let this guilt inform your actions at all times, essentially. The thing is, you need to reckon with it in a truthful, honest way. You cannot sort of say that now you're going to unconditionally support the state of Israel and anything that it might want and anything that it might do, even if it includes the displacement, even the extermination of another minority in the Middle East, and have that sort of expiate your sins. That's it's absurd. It doesn't work like that. Germany also was never truly denazified, right? We have to remember that West Germany had a lot of Nazis in high-ranking positions after World War II. And that's something that also, I think, should be part of this guilt, essentially. But again, it isn't. And also, as time went by after World War II, the far right in Europe started looking at the state of Israel with admiration, as a lot of them do today still. Anti-Semitism is rampant among the far right in Europe. Don't get me wrong. However, from their perspective, there's much to be admired in the state of Israel. It's an ethno-nationalist state that makes no bones about it, announces to the world that that's exactly what it is, that it's a state in which only a certain ethnic group and religious group has rights of self-determination. And it's a state that will basically knows no limits in imposing the will of its people that it gives self-determination to over the rights of whoever else might inhabit that land, even if it involves their murder, their ethnically cleansing. So there's much to be, from the point of view of the far right in Europe and of the world in general, there's much to be admired.
I've never thought about that way, but yeah, sort of. It kind of, yeah. It's
Yeah, and you can see and you can hear it from the horse's mouth if you start looking at how German media, for instance, and politicians talked about Israel in the 60s, the 70s. They talk about it in very racist terms, but now in the sense of like like they just found out that the Jewish people are also white, or that they can't be white, you know. So they say that they went to Israel and they saw these beautiful blonde, blue-eyed people, sort of like building something heroically. So it starts to sound very sort of fascist, like, you know, like European fascist, like sort of like where the source of this admiration that they have.
For me, I always thought that they were white, but because for me, maybe everyone that is whiter than me is white.
It's important to remember that Israel is seen as part of the West, right? You hear it all the time, the only democracy in the Middle East. It's it's important. It's been an important element to sort of like bringing Israel into this alliance of the West, basically, which expresses itself in very militaristic terms. Of course, it's very well known, sort of the military binds that Israel has with the United States, and the strategic importance of this alliance, not only to Israel but also to the United States, and because Israel is so strategically positioned in the Middle East. But you're right. It's important to remember, first of all, that the Jewish people are a very diverse group. So not all Jews are light-skinned by any means. But I think it's also a very complex topic, like how the perception of Jewish people and their inclusion or exclusion from being perceived as being white has sort of evolved. And there are people who are way more sort of like qualified to speak on this than I am. But I do think that, very broadly speaking, you know, if you take it a few decades ago, you know, the time of World War II, very obviously Jewish people, even light-skinned Jewish people, were not seen as white. And they were persecuted, they were exterminated, they were the victims of a genocide. But it seems to me that in the post-war, there's been a bit of this shift in perception that at least a certain part of you know, certain members from the wider group of Jewish people started to be perceived as white, essentially. And it seems to me that sometimes in the minds of Europeans, or in the minds of Germans, subconsciously they will never say that out loud, but it seems that the particularly horrifying thing about the Holocaust wasn't the scale of it, wasn't the you know, just the sheer brutality and the you know, the industrial proportions that it took place, and you know, all the horrors that we are so well acquainted with the Holocaust. But really, a part of what's shocking about it is that it was perpetrated against what are now considered, you know, to be white people, like you know, European Jews, essentially. So there is this, I think, if you look beneath the surface, very often you find this racist elements, and there's a lot of them that we could talk about, but there's this particular one that occurs to me in what we call remembrance culture of the Holocaust, especially in places like Germany and East Europe.
Yeah, interesting. I never thought about it in that way, because also there's this in Namibia also was caused a genocide by the Germans during the colony time, right? And I don't know if there was or what's the recognition or the repairing of that damage there. It hasn't been any, or has it been?
It wasn't even acknowledged to be a genocide by the German states up until very recently.
2019, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
They paid, basically, but they did not pay to the descendancy of the people involved. They paid in general.
Okay, like to the state, basically, or something like that.
Yeah. The more that I see, every time that I look at the news, more countries are getting involved into this conflict between Palestine and Israel.
Well, I think it's a very important thing that South Africa has done in bringing this case to the ICJ. We need to be clear that no matter what the ruling is, it won't stop Israel. So if it's ruled that, can't remember what the actual correct term in the ICJ is, but if it's basically ruled that there's enough evidence that for an intention to commit genocide on the part of the state of Israel, still that's not going to stop them. Yeah. And they've announced that already, that they don't give a damn about what the ruling is going to be. So I have to be real about this. But nevertheless, it's important because it's important to bring this sort of pressure to the table, and it's important also that it comes from places like South Africa, that it comes from the global South in general, because I think you guys, I probably don't need to tell you this, but sometimes Europeans and people in the North in general, they have certain things certain beliefs that they take for granted, and they think that the entire world thinks the same. And in fact, that's not the case at all. If you look at the global South, if you look at Africa, Latin America, you see that actually the vast majority of people in the world does not agree with what's called the international community, which is basically, Europe, the United States, Australia, Japan, on a lot of issues. And I think it's important to make that clear, because we need to take a stand as a global South, I think, in those international arenas, and do what the West refuses to do. Not only that, but what the West even cheers on and actively supports. So Palestine being a very vivid example of that.
And I think also, like what you say, like about the global South, I mean, most of it has been colonialized in the past. So there is some sort of sense of empathy of how it must feel that a country is invading you or killing your people, and nobody is going to do anything about it. I was telling him in the previous episode of the podcast, but in the Spanish version, that there's always this discourse or talks about United States wanting to intervene in Mexico militarily to combat the cartels. And of course, there is always the pressure to them to not to do it, because every time the United States intervenes, the places just get bombed. If the United States says, okay, we're going to go to this region, civil people might die, Mexico will say, hey, stop it. There are human lives over there. We know maybe for a fact that the international community will not intervene. They might not care because they haven't cared when it's very clear that a lot of human lives are dying in Gaza and nobody can do anything. So if the United States does it, nobody will do anything. That's my fear.
That's often the feeling, and that's very often also the truth. But look at Yemen, for example, But yeah, what you were saying before as well, take a look at South Africa, for example. They, suffered under apartheid.
Yeah.
Just like the Palestinian people do in Israel and Palestine. History is watching us. It's watching Germany. It's watching us at an individual level. What is it that we're doing? Are we going out to the streets to ostensibly protest against fascism and spitting at the people who you claim to be defending at these demonstrations, preventing them from joining these demonstrations? Mm-hmm. Or are you out there truly speaking out against fascism, against ethno-nationalism, and speaking for freedom for Palestinians, for Israeli Jews, for everyone in Palestine, essentially? Yeah. Or are you making that illegal? Are you arresting people for making this what should be a very uncontroversial event?
When you look back in history and everything was happened already in the 30s, this oppression against the Jews, and then they saw that they were putting them in trains and deporting them into East Europe, and people nowadays say, why people saw that and nobody did anything? And then it comes now to the point that, like, yeah, right now we're seeing also some sort of oppressions, and still a lot of people are not doing anything against it.
Yeah, there was this this quote that I saw on Twitter recently. I wish I can remember. I wish I could remember who it's from, so I could mention it, but I can't. But it's something like, a liberal is someone who supports all of the causes of liberation except the current one, the one that's currently happening.
Yeah.
I think that's basically what we're seeing. You know, it's a very amusing statement, but there's a very deep truth in it. I think people need to understand that it rarely feels, I think, to the direct perpetrators is another matter, but like to the people who enable it, it very rarely feels like a crime such as a genocide is taking place. And so we always need to be vigilant, because it's never going to come, always might be too strong a term, but it can happen that it sneaks up on you, especially when it's being supported by your leaders, your political leaders, when mainstream media is supporting it, and when the majority of the population, much as a result of that, also is either doesn't have strong opinions on it, or directly actively supports it as well. So it's important to it requires vigilance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so people have made this point over and over again in the last few months. If you ever ask yourself, what is it that you would be doing during the Nazi period, if you were living in Germany, or in any other cases or places in which fascism rose up and crimes such as genocide took place, what you're doing right now is exactly what you would have been doing then.
Yeah, good point. As a normal citizen, what can we do for that? Especially for people like us and many of the ones who might be hearing, because this is meant to be for expats and migrants or whatever you identify yourself. We don't have a right to vote.
Be on the streets, join the demonstrations, join the protests, especially on the topic of Palestine. I think it's important, especially for those of us who are in positions in which we don't have to, for example, fear being detained or maybe charged by the police for whatever bullshit charge during the demonstration, having to fear that resulting in your loss of your residence permit or something like that. And not to mention, of course, German people and white Germans in particular, to show up in force and to keep the pressure up on the streets. Also be vocal on social media. It's a lot of people say that it has no impact. It does. I think it's a fairly crazy thing to say these days, that social media has no impact. It's like saying that television and newspapers don't have any impact. It's how a lot of people, and I make this comparison for a reason, because it's a lot of way. It's the way a lot of people consume news, for example. So, for instance, I'm very active on TikTok, as you know, and sometimes I just talk about the news, and a lot of people in the comments will say that that's the first that they're hearing from this, and it's not, like sort of obscure news. Sometimes it's very big things. So that's the only way that you can reach people sometimes and tell them about what's going on, is through social media. So that's also important. And even if you can vote yourself, you can also influence elections in other ways. So, for example, if you take DiEM25 and our political parties, obviously we recognize that each country has voting laws that allows only a certain people to vote. But we have people helping out the build the parties and helping reach people and canvas for the party who don't have a EU passport at all. When I joined DiEM25, I did not have a EU passport. So it's important, don't let that sort of like scare you away or demotivate you from being active in whatever space you choose to be active. Also, since you gave me an opening to do that, I'd like to give a little do a little plug here. We're going to run in Germany for the European elections with our political party Merit25, and right now we need to collect signatures to even be on the ballots. You need to collect 4,000 signatures. And this being Germany, it's all paperwork. None of it is digitalized.
Okay.
So there's an actual form that people need to print out and fill out and send it to us. If you would like to see this international, Europe's first international left-wing political party, a party that's pro-Palestine, that is for a lot of what I just, that we've been talking about in this episode, go to merit25.de/EU and you can find all the information there of what is it that you need to fill out to contribute your signature and those of your family and friends if you wish to do so.
This has been a quite intense first episode, quite a very dense topic for the first episode. Benji, we're gonna be killed by the libertarians.
If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, let this be a sign that these guys are for real. They're not. They want to start with a bang.
Yeah. I have one more question. Yep. So whenever we receive a lot of comments in our social media, and most of them, or some of them, they tell us that we shouldn't criticize the country because we are not Germans. Do you encounter that situation also, and how do you react to that?
There was this. I actually pinned this to my Instagram profile. It was a comment that someone sent to me on TikTok on the video. I can't even remember what the video. I think I was talking about how Germans had reacted to Greta Thunberg. Speaking out in defense of Palestine.
Oh, yeah.
And just being insane about it. And so this person commented, because it wasn't the first time that I did something like that and criticize Germans, essentially. She asked, may I ask, why do you still live in Germany? And I answered, to annoy people like you.
Yeah. So
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of the look, at the end of the day, on a more serious note, we all live in this country, we contribute to German society, especially when you talk about a place like Berlin. What is Berlin known for? It's known for people like you here, for this cosmopolitan atmosphere that is so rare and it's almost magical that this city has, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have every right, and everyone who has their life here, no matter where they come from, as long as this is their home, they have every right to speak out. Doesn't matter what passport they hold, they have every right to be active and to speak out on the issues that we're currently living through and shaping the present and the future of this country and of this city. That's a firm conviction that I have. I don't give a shit about borders. I think as long as you want to live in a place and contribute to this society in a positive way, you should be allowed to do so. And if you do that, then you should have a say, just like everyone else, on the issues of the place that you live in. I know that a lot of people would disagree with that, but these are the people that I will disagree about just about everything.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So we'll agree to disagree, I suppose.
All right. Perfect. It was very nice to have you here in the podcast. Thanks for letting us dive into these very difficult topics, and also for being our first guest in this English version of the Guten Tag podcast. I hope we don't get canceled. Leave your comments. If you have any idea of the topics that you want to see on this podcast, please let us know. Also on Spotify, 5 stars, subscribe on YouTube, and I will also link the English version of the podcast Instagram account in the comments. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks again, Lucas.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.